Some secrets can change your life. Greetings, dear viewer. The hero of this story was a very good man, and he helped his friend, but in return his friend told him a secret. Let's listen to this story. Let's go. The ability to help others is a double-edged sword, no matter how painful it is for me to admit it. Despite the melancholic tone, I felt compelled to help my dear friend, believing that if not me, then who? Little did I know that in doing so, I would stumble upon a dark secret that my own wife was keeping, and that I myself would need help. This revelation was completely unexpected. It was my responsibility to choose a restaurant for our Friday strategy session, and I chose a Hungarian restaurant. I really wanted to try their dish, rocket crumpli. For those unfamiliar with Hungarian cuisine, rocket crumpli is a delicious potato dish made with layers of bacon, eggs, and sausage. The Mager's restaurant serves the best version of this dish I've ever tasted, and I've tasted a lot of them. Our group of 6 members of Isaac's Forsman Marketing's Imagination team enjoyed the meal immensely. We sat down at the table and began ordering drinks. Bob Isaacs, the CEO's son and the leader of our team, pulled out his trusty folder and notebook, cleared his throat, and began the Friday afternoon meeting. Our team spent 2 to 3 hours discussing the status of our projects and planning for the future. The atmosphere was relaxed and informal, and having a Friday meeting helped us start the week with a sense of momentum. Following this routine helped build a deep sense of camaraderie in our team. We have followed it diligently for almost 3 years now, since Bob took over the department, and our performance has improved significantly. Although Bob was originally appointed because of his last name, his accomplishments have truly won over the team, as evidenced by the significant increase in our profits. About half an hour into our meeting, I happened to look in the back corner of the restaurant, a popular spot for couples who want to be alone, and Marcy and I had reserved this table in advance. But my confusion was palpable when I saw a familiar silhouette at the table, even though the woman was accompanied by a man who was clearly not her husband. It was Laura Wycliffe, my wife's closest friend and colleague. For over 2 decades. My head turned in surprise. Up to that point, I had always thought of Laura as a faithful companion of the Mother Superior of our district Catholic Church. Trying to control my thoughts, I forced myself to look away from the couple and concentrate on the meeting. I prayed that Laura hadn't noticed me yet, for I was afraid that she wouldn't stay in the restaurant, let alone get carried away with her activity. My face grew warm, and I felt sweat break out on it. As I kept looking at them, I saw that they were kissing gently, and that he was caressing her hand sweetly. After enduring this unpleasant sight for 10 minutes, I came up with a plausible excuse to leave early. Fortunately, Bob graciously allowed me to leave. The drive home was a blur, with a dilemma swirling in my head: how to tell my wife that her best friend, St. Laura, was kissing another man in a restaurant, possibly hinting at an affair. When I got home, I realized I had a few hours off before my wife, who worked as an assistant to a vice president at Wells Fargo Bank, got back. I decided to change into something more comfortable, choosing jeans and a t-shirt, and poured myself a glass of Casamigos tequila. As I took a sip, I couldn't help but laugh at their over-the-top advertising campaign, which got me thinking about marketing tactics. One thing that stood out in their ads was the use of humor, which made me think about the power of a well-executed marketing strategy. My attention was drawn to the inclusion of George Clooney as a co-owner of Casamigos. While I appreciate his direct appeal, it seems that the ads are aimed at women rather than men. Traditionally, women are not significant consumers of tequila compared to men. Despite the fact that George endorses this product, I am skeptical that it will attract a significant number of female customers. This is just my personal opinion, and only time will tell how accurate my prediction is. As is often the case, I think George made the wrong choice by not following Brigadier Isaac's example. That's just my opinion. I was distracted by the fourth shot when I heard my wife come in through the garage. Instead of greeting her immediately, as I usually do, I got lost in my thoughts. This made her anxious when she entered the family room. "Oh no," she said in a hushed voice. "Are you going to tell me that we need to talk?" Marcy sat down on the couch in front of my chair, looking like she'd been punched in the stomach. "We really do need to talk." "Actually," I clarified, "it's not for the reason you think." She raised her head. A glimmer of hope flickered in her eyes. "As far as I can tell, we're fine. This conversation does not concern us," I explained, and she took a deep breath, raised her eyebrows, and then shrugged. "Who are we talking about?" She asked about Laura Tura Wycliffe. I said, "It's hard to believe, isn't it?" I watched as my wife nearly fell off the couch, seemingly oblivious to the near miss. Her look of shock was soon replaced by one of annoyance. "Okay, spit it out." She demanded that it better be good, or you'd be kicked off the couch for a week. I told her what I had seen at the restaurant and explained that just because she was fondling a man did not mean she was having an affair with him. While this may be important information, I have to admit. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Laura wouldn't do that. She's your best friend. You know her better than I do," I commented. I took a swig of my tequila. Marcy stared at me silently for a while. Her expression was unreadable. "So what's next?" I asked. "I guess you're going to want to be in charge. No matter what we decide to do, I will take care of it, no matter what we decide," she confirmed. I raised an eyebrow and said, "You're not going to tell Tim?" I asked, "Why is that?" She replied, "You're not sure about what you saw? How can we resist that?" She continued, "I don't want to get involved in their marriage without knowing the whole story. We have to do something. I may not have all the facts, but what I've seen makes me question Laura's loyalty." I countered, "If I had told you that Tim had been seen kissing another woman, you would have gone straight to Laura to talk to her," I reminded her. "I'm closer to her than I am to him. You know that." She noticed, "But that doesn't excuse her behavior. You should at least talk to her and hear her side of the story," I advised. "I can't just point the finger at her without proof," Marcy insisted. "I have to handle the situation more delicately than you. It's interesting to hear her talk about invading someone's personal space," I commented on Monday and Tuesday. Marcy didn't think about Laura, so on Wednesday night, after putting our daughter Rose to bed, I asked if my wife had talked to Laura and stumbled mid-sentence. She quickly changed the subject, effectively ending the conversation. Having decided to leave everything as it is, I decided to discuss this matter with my wife the next evening. "If it's inconvenient for you to meet her, I'll arrange it myself." I offered to remind her that I was the one who saw Laura. "No, please don't do that," my wife Marcy begged. "I'll talk to her tomorrow." I had a long-term relationship with my wife, and I could tell when she was hesitating whether to do something. It made me worry about the whole situation. "I need an answer." "My dear, if you're afraid to go to her, I need to talk to Tim. If she's cheating on him, and he finds out that I was in the no zone and didn't tell him, he's going to be rightfully upset. We may not be as close as you and Laura, but he has been my friend for many years. True friends are always honest with one another. If my wife were unfaithful, and a friend knew about it, but didn't tell me, it would hurt our friendship. To betray a friend in this way is inexcusable." I stressed this to Marcy. She seemed upset by my words and agreed to talk to Laura the next day. I had no idea that this conversation would eventually lead to the collapse of my marriage, but only then did I realize there was a problem. When Marcy returned the next day, she seemed to be hiding something. I got the feeling that she didn't want me to bring it up. After Rose left with her friends on Friday night, I decided to talk to her about it. She pretended to forget, but eventually Laura revealed the truth. It wasn't exactly how I imagined it, but Marcy admitted that she had crossed the line with a guy named Kenneth Attenborough. She promised it would not happen again. She insists that she simply lost control of her actions. If Marcy could have looked me in the eye when she spoke, I might have been more inclined to believe her, but she refused to meet my gaze, instead staring at my waist, over my shoulder, or anywhere but my eyes. In the 22 years of our marriage, she never avoided eye contact, even when she admitted to damaging my cherished Mustang Shelby GT50. 20,105. I had a feeling that Marcy and Kenneth were communicating, but I rejected the idea of a relationship as ridiculous. Nevertheless, Marcy got involved in this case, protecting her boyfriend and outright deceiving me. For the first time in our long history, she deliberately lied to me, and it broke my heart. I spent the next few days trying to figure out why my wife would betray my trust, and I couldn't find a single excuse. A few days later, Bob Isaacs asked for a one-on-one meeting with me in his office, subtly hinting that we needed to talk about the mistake I had made. Although our team rarely invites anyone in for such discussions, Bob handles them with care, maintaining confidentiality and not embarrassing anyone in public. After exchanging pleasantries, Bob asked, "What's wrong?" "Norm, you look worried and your performance has been poor lately." I told Bob about Marcy's recent deception regarding a possible affair with her boyfriend and admitted that I didn't know what to do next. Bob, staring at me intently, offered to hire a private investigator to look into the case of Marcy's friend. "The main thing is to find peace of mind. Norm, you can either fixate on this or you can face the truth, find out the truth and move on." He told me I have a contact who's affordable and can provide answers promptly. "Would you tell your friend if you found out that his wife was cheating on him? Consider the possible consequences of such news. You may be blamed. What if your friend is angry with you even though his wife is unfaithful? This is a valid fear, but wouldn't it be a betrayal of your friendship? If you kept this secret from him, I thought for a moment you'd either be the best friend or the biggest fool," Bob remarked. The next day I met with Roy Hoover, the private investigator Bob had recommended. 2 weeks later, I finally had proof that Laura Wycliffe was cheating on her husband. Now it was my turn to do something, but I couldn't bring myself to tell my wife, who was clearly protecting her boyfriend despite the betrayal. In 20 years of working with my wife, I understood Laura's character better than her own husband, Tim. Over the years, I've heard countless stories about Laura that have allowed me to get a clearer picture of her true nature. I first met Tim through his wife, as he met me. He seemed to me to be a respectable man, if a little reserved, perhaps because of his engineering training. Nevertheless, we communicated well and enjoyed each other's company. All four of us, passionate about sports, formed a strong bond and shared many similar values, including a belief in the importance of marital fidelity. But Roy Hoover's work destroyed my idea of Tim's commitment to this belief. As for my wife, her position on this issue remained unclear. I called Tim to set up a lunch date for next Tuesday. I thought about meeting on Monday, but Mondays have always been hard enough without adding stress. I knew this meeting was going to be difficult. I asked the waitress for a table in a quiet corner for some privacy. I ordered a double tank of Rit on the rocks, and Tim chose a dark craft beer from a large selection. He liked craft beer. When he came to the table, a nervous smile appeared on his face. "Are you drinking already? It must be really bad," he joked. "Who's unlucky, you or me?" "You?" I replied with a sigh. We ordered food, and as soon as the server was cleared, I brought up a difficult subject. "I don't want to upset you, Tim, but your wife is cheating on you." I said I'm telling you this because you're my friend, and I hope a good friend would do the same for me if my spouse was cheating on me, instead of keeping me in the dark. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he turned away. "Damn it," he muttered. I had no idea. "How did you guess? Did Marcy say something?" I repeated his frown. "I don't know how to tell you this, but I think Marcy was covering for her," I admitted, avoiding his gaze. "A few weeks ago, I saw something that made me suspicious, and when I talked to Marcy about it, she tried to downplay it at first, but after promising to talk to Laura, she came back with her version, saying that Laura had confessed to some wrongdoing, but denied the fact of infidelity. Despite Marcy's honesty, I felt in my gut that she wasn't telling me the whole truth, and I decided to investigate the situation myself. I didn't want to betray my friends. We had the waitress bring our food to the table. My stomach was churning with excitement, and I could only imagine how he felt. How long has this been going on, and who am I going to make him pay with? "I promise I'll get him," he growled. I can't say exactly how long, but the man in question is Kenneth Attenborough. I saw them kissing in the Maggers 3 weeks ago. I didn't know who he was at the time, but the detective I hired turned out to be very useful. I gave him the dossier and a flash drive with photos and videos here, I said, handing him a large envelope. He opened the envelope carefully, trying to hide confidential information from prying eyes. As he read the contents, a range of emotions flashed across his face: anger, disgust, and sadness. "Damn it, did you hire a private investigator to spy on my wife?" he shouted. "Why did you do that?" "I'm grateful, of course, but it's probably worth a lot. I had a feeling that your wife was being unfaithful, but I couldn't bring it up without solid evidence. You are my friend." "I was only trying to be a good friend," I said, and he lowered his eyes. His face became unreadable. "Damn it," he muttered. "I'm sorry, Norm. I guess I'm not as good a friend as you are." I couldn't help but lose my temper. Damn it," I yelled, jumping out of my chair. "Calm down, Norm. Sit down," he shouted, trying to calm me down. I looked around and realized that all the attention was now on me. I raised my hands in apology, and most of the people went back to their conversations. I took my seat again and whispered, "Helly, speak up." I tried to keep my voice low. "From what you just told me, our wives were protecting each other," he continued. "The pledge of loyalty we thought we had all agreed to seems to have been honored only by you and me." He paused before confessing. "I found out about Marcy 6 months ago. Laura confessed to me that she had been seeing a man she met in a bar a year ago, right around the time I found out about Marcy's actions. She begged me not to share this information with you, and unfortunately, I agreed. I'm really sorry, Norm." "So you're saying that my beloved wife has been involved with another man for the past year and a half? Do you know his name? Is their relationship ongoing?" I bombarded him with questions. "Yes, it's been about a year and a half now, and as far as I know, their romance continues. From time to time, I catch snippets of their phone conversations. Now that I know the truth, Laura no longer feels the need to hide anything from me. She says his name is Bill Goland, and he works as a junior executive at a technology company near where the girls work. He and his colleagues were seen at a bar that girls often visit after work. Trying my best to stay calm, I could barely contain the urge to scream or panic. I couldn't believe that everything turned out so badly for me that day. It looks like we're both in a quandary. Figuratively speaking, Tim commented. I asked the waitress to bring us more drinks. I called my office and informed Bob Isaacs that I had some personal business to attend to and would be out for the rest of the day. Tim did the same and his office decided to take the day off as well. I then contacted Roy and gave him some additional assignments. This time Tim agreed to cover all expenses, which I thought was fair. That sounds fair, buddy, he nodded. 2 weeks later, I received my own set of documents confirming what Tim had told me during those 2 weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about what went wrong in my marriage that led Marcy to seek another man. Discovering her infidelity 2 decades later was painful enough, but seeing the photos was like a dagger in my heart. The most painful were the ones where she looked at him with such adoration. It was obvious that the connection between them was not limited to physical intimacy. Despite Marcy's attempts to initiate intimacy for 2 weeks, there was no evidence of it. I made excuses to avoid her advances, and all the while, I was consumed by the fear that my wife was seeing someone else. Instead of waiting passively for proof, I took active steps. I met with my attorney to resolve typical financial issues. After receiving the envelope of incriminating evidence, I wasted no time preparing for trial, and sent Marcy there immediately. Despite the fact that I live in a state where guilt is not required, I decided not to use adultery as a reason for our divorce. This decision seems to have confused my unfaithful wife. What's wrong, dear? She asked with tears in her eyes when I called her just 5 minutes after filing. Do you really have to ask? I replied calmly. Two can play a game of deception. Marcy, you've been cheating on me for over a year. Did you really think you could get away with it forever without consequences? There was silence in the room for a few anxious moments before I heard her sigh heavily. I wanted to tell you soon. I just wasn't ready, she admitted. What the hell? Marcy, how long did you think you could keep this from me? I threw in 1.5 years. You're right. I should have told you sooner. She agreed. I wasn't looking for him. Norm. It just happened. We have a connection. I love him. He's my soulmate. Well, that's that. I grumbled. He's clearly your soulmate. I remembered the time when we had a strong bond and she was in love with me. I remember being your soulmate. I thought irritably. Damn, a woman. I'm sorry, Norm. I should have been more upfront with you. She replied before ending the call. I sighed and thought to myself. Well, everything was going smoothly when I walked into the room. Marcy had already placed a large pizza from my favorite delivery place on the table. She poured herself a glass of wine, and I grabbed a beer. I wish we had talked about this earlier, I said, and she blushed, feeling guilty. It's not your fault, Norm. It's all my fault. She confessed, I've been in love with you for a long time, so he's just taken a place in my heart. Was this before or after we went to bed? I replied, Oh, Norm, did you have to talk about this? I was hoping we could deal with it as adults. She laments. I'll do my best to be careful, Marcy, but it's hard for me, just like it's hard for you to be faithful. I replied with a hint of sarcasm. Her expression became shocking and tears welled up in her eyes as she took a deep breath. She finally admitted, I guess I deserve it. Yes, I deserve it. I replied honestly. 7 months later, Marcy and I joined the ranks of the divorced after selling the house. I received a generous portion of the proceeds, which allowed me to make a substantial down payment on a 3-bedroom apartment just a 15-minute drive from my office. My daughter informed me that Marcy had moved in with her lover. Meanwhile, our daughter Rose was preparing to begin her senior year of college, and although she was having a hard time coming to terms with our divorce, she was trying to make sense of the situation. She wondered if Marcy should have ended her relationship with me before she started dating Bill. In my opinion, it makes perfect sense if she doesn't love you anymore and has found love elsewhere. Dad, everyone deserves to be with the one they love. I hope you'll find one someday, Rose commented. I grumbled back. I thought I found my soul mate when I married your mother. I didn't expect to be replaced. I don't remember there being a replacement clause in our vows. Noticing my eye roll, Rose wisely chose to remain silent for the first 6 months after the divorce. I preferred not to think about what might happen if Rose found herself in a similar situation. I wasn't in a rush to date like some of my friends because I didn't consider satisfying physical desires a top priority. I believed that there was more to life than making love. Although I didn't talk about my divorce, I was willing to talk about it if it came up naturally in conversation. Over time, more and more single women began to appear in my life. It seemed paradoxical to me. In my early 20s, it was not easy for me to find a soulmate, but now, at 40, women were showing interest in me. After a while, I discussed this observation with a friend who was going through a divorce. "You're a godsend, Norm," he said. "You were handsome and successful in your career. There are more single women than men our age. Many men over 40 are led by dates with much younger partners, which further narrows the circle of acquaintances." He said I hadn't thought about that prospect before, Al, I replied. For the next 6 months, I tried to get away on weekends. I must admit that I dated both younger and older partners. One memorable experience was with a 25-year-old girl who challenged me physically, leaving me exhausted and barely able to function. The next day, she joked that there were pills for my problem, referring to my problems the next morning. On the contrary, communicating with 55-year-old women was kindred to my body and my ego. On my second Christmas, a divorced man approached Bob Isaacs, walked into my office, closed the door behind him, and then sat down across from me. He looked visibly troubled. "What's on your mind, Bob Norm? Are you planning on bringing a couple to the company Christmas party next week?" Bob asked carefully. "I've noticed that you've been seeing a lot of people lately, so you can bring whoever you want." I noticed beads of sweat on Bob's forehead. I didn't understand what this conversation was about, and I hadn't thought about bringing anyone this year. I replied carefully. "Why do you ask?" when he sighed heavily. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, afraid that he was about to share some disturbing news. He began to tell me how his wife, a strong personality to be reckoned with and a little busy, had suggested that he consider dating her former college roommate, Lainey, after going through a painful divorce due to infidelity. Marilyn felt that Lainey and I were the perfect couple. "I know I can't make you agree with me, but if you don't, Marilyn will make my life miserable." "So what's the deal with Lainey? Does she have 2 noses or something?" "No, nothing like that. No physical abnormalities. She is generally very friendly." "Aw, that's it." I threw in the classic wonderful personality. "That usually means she's not very good looking, right?" "No, really, I assure you. She's not unattractive at all, and she has a really wonderful personality." "Please, Norm, please," he begged. I laughed when I saw his grimace. Knowing how attractive his wife was, I wondered if she had the same charm. "Okay, I agree, but Marilyn better make it worth my while. I said I agree. He said, looking much more animated than he had just been. Since I've agreed, tell me about Miss Personality. I asked over the next few minutes. He described my mysterious companion in detail. Her height and weight were perfect, and her long blonde hair flowed down her back. Despite being a former NCAA Division I volleyball player, she managed to stay in shape after having children and working as an actuary for an insurance company. She was not only smart, but also detail-oriented, which was an interesting combination of qualities. I wondered why Marilyn was trying to set me up with someone like her. I couldn't help but wonder. My wife just can't resist introducing people to each other. She's sure you and her friend will get along great. The annual Isaac's Forsman Christmas party was huge, with live music, delicious snacks, ribs, a speech by CEO Philip Isaacs, who is Bob's father, and various awards. The atmosphere was one of elegance. The men were dressed in their best suits, and the women in beautiful gowns. Philip's wife Phoebe was in charge of every detail. When I arrived at Bob Isaac's house to pick up my date, I felt like a nervous teenager on a first date. Marilyn greeted me at the door with a friendly kiss on the cheek and then invited me inside, and when Bob came over, I couldn't help but smile awkwardly. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Isaac, and don't worry, I'll make sure she gets home on time." I joked, knowing Bob had picked up on my nervousness. He smiled back at me, clearly preparing a witty response. "I won't hesitate to find you both in my car," he warned, and we exchanged mischievous grins. Just then my companion appeared. She walked confidently into the room in a form-fitting turquoise dress that fell elegantly to the floor with a daring slit that accentuated her perfectly toned left leg. Her hair was styled in a chic high ponytail. Her hair cascaded down her back, and her makeup accentuated her stunning azure eyes and those luscious full lips. I tried to speak, but I was speechless. "Well said, Norm," Marilyn purred, making my cheeks burn as Lainey and I entered the party room. Heads turned and I realized it wasn't just because of my new Armani suit. Upon arrival, we were greeted by Philly and Phoebe. "Isaac's Lainey, honey, I'm so glad to see you again. Do you enjoy spending time with children? Did you bring your son?" Phoebe asked. "Norm, I hope you don't mind if I borrow your companion for a minute," Philip said with a grin and took my hand warmly. I worked under him for almost 2 decades, and our relationship went beyond the usual employer-employee bond. He was more like a father to me. After my father died, 2 years after I joined Isaac's team, Philip became the father I relied on for advice, and he and Phoebe kept in touch, especially when they learned of my difficulties with Marcy. Even though we never talked about it directly, I could tell they knew about my dating after the divorce. "We've known Lainey almost as long as we've known Marilyn," Philip commented. "It's nice to see that she's under a good influence. Considering you're a son, I couldn't help but notice how subtly he used the sunlight to hint at a deeper connection between us." "Absolutely, sir," I replied. With Marilyn planning this evening, I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I promised to be respectful. "You can count on me," I assured him. "I believe you," Philip confirmed. "I am glad we have come to an understanding." Throughout the evening, Lainey and I shared life stories and got to know each other better. Her dancing was elegant and graceful. I cherished the moments when we danced slow dances and her form fell easily into my arms, even though she was asked to dance by other men throughout the evening. She always looked at me first, even though I wanted her to dance with no one else. The uncertain nature of our relationship did not allow me to protest. However, she seemed to understand my unspoken feelings and politely declined all other offers. The evening was beautiful and ended with a heartfelt kiss on the doorstep of Isaac's house. On the way home, I asked her to write down her phone number, which was sitting in the driveway of the Isaac's house. I called her. "What are your plans for tomorrow?" I asked. I had to admit that Marilyn was right. Lainey was exactly what I was looking for, and surprisingly, we didn't sleep together on the first 5 dates. It wasn't until our 6th date that we finally did, and it was an amazing experience for both of us. I didn't know how much time had passed since my last intimate encounter with Lainey, but she responded readily when we started kissing on the couch in my apartment after dinner and dancing. I may not have been a skilled dancer like Fred Air or Gene Kelly, but my ex-wife loved to dance, and I had learned enough to get by. It's funny how that skill suddenly came in handy in my life. I never would have thought of it that night. Lainey looked especially excited as we left the club and headed back to my apartment. The night was filled with unparalleled intimacy, and I saw a real gem in her. After we hugged, she looked at me with a puzzled expression and exclaimed, "What kind of world is this?" She said that during our conversation she felt as if she had blacked out for a moment and then returned to reality. I couldn't help but smile at her words. I felt a surge of pride and thought, "You are truly wonderful." I exclaimed, "You are amazing." Perhaps we could repeat this experience in the future, but she replied quickly, "Not today. I don't think I can take it anymore. Your wish is my command." I assured her, then leaned down and kissed her fervently. 2 weeks later, I met Lainey's 13-year-old son, Sean, who affectionately called Bob and Marilyn his aunt and uncle. He was impressed by my skills at table hockey, foosball, and frisbee. It was obvious that his father did not spend much time with him during his visits. Sean was shy of me at first, but by the end of the 2nd day, he was glued to me. "You never told me you were good with kids," Lainey said, acknowledging my newfound talent. "I love kids and have always dreamed of having a family of 4. Unfortunately, my ex didn't want any more kids after the first one. At first, we agreed to have 2 children, but she changed her mind and often reminded me of the physical sacrifices she had to make. She was a devoted mother to our daughter, and I can't fault her parenting skills, and in general, I had no complaints about her as a partner until things started to fall apart towards the end of our relationship. Lainey asked what had changed in the woman Bob and Marilyn once considered worthy. It seems that she developed feelings for another man and began to distance herself from me. She even referred to him as her fiancé. Lainey suggested that we stop talking about her and focus on other things. 6 months later, she finally accepted my offer and changed jobs to be with me. Together. Saturday, we started looking for a new place to live. The next Monday at work, I asked Lainey to marry me. Bob walked into my office with a big grin on his face. Okay, Marilyn was right. I confessed to Bob, who sat smugly across from me. I admit she was right. What's the catch? You seem too happy. Bob reassured me that there was no catch. You just have to be a good stepfather to your beloved nephew. Bob and I were enjoying a drink in a quiet pub after work when I noticed Tim at the next table with an amazing girl. It had been about a year since I'd last seen Tim, when he and Laura were trying to repair their relationship. My friendship with Bob had grown considerably since I started dating Lainey. It was obvious that their attempts were unsuccessful. Hi, it's been a while. How are you? I asked as I walked over to his table. A look of concern crossed his face as he saw me approach, and it was obvious that my presence foreshadowed the collapse of both our marriages. Hi, Norm, how are you? He replied. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say hello, I said, trying to reassure him. There was no invasion. This is Anna McGill, my girlfriend, whom he introduced. From his calm demeanor, it was clear that this young woman of about 20 was just a friend. Anna, this is Norm, the man who completely changed my life. Anna looked surprised, Tim said. Tim noticed her reaction and realized that he needed to give her a short explanation, at least a short version. This is his private investigator who uncovered my ex-wife's infidelity. After I revealed his wife's infidelity to him, he decided to divorce her. As for me, I was trying to build a relationship with my own spouse, but unfortunately things weren't going so well, Tim explained, giving me a wry smile. I'm not sure if she went back to her boyfriend, but I found out later that they resumed their relationship after about a year. Can you imagine that? May I ask? He asked, interested in the latest events in my life. I told him that I had gotten engaged to Lainey when I left everything behind. I thought you'd never get married again. He commented that she must be very special to heal the wounds inflicted on Marcy. He added that she's truly extraordinary. I agreed. I'm sorry it didn't work out for you, Tim. I said sincerely, well, if you get remarried, I think that's the end of the X chapter. Tim said I gave him a confused look. I thought my relationship with Marcy was over when we got divorced. Didn't you hear him ask incredulously? Didn't you hear what I said? Marcy's partner left her. He said to me, didn't your daughter tell you? It turned out that their relationship was not as harmonious as Marcy thought. She wanted commitment, and he was looking for other ways that she could mistake their relationship for love while he saw it as purely physical. I couldn't help but wonder why Rose hadn't told me any of this. I said that although I had lost interest in the situation, I expected her to contact you and try to make peace with you. I was sure Rose had told her about your engagement, so she didn't bother. No matter what. I have to admit, I am very lucky. Lainey and I had a bond that was probably stronger than the one I had with Marcy, both emotionally and physically. She also has a son, Sean. From a simple stepson, he quickly became my son in every way but paper, even after his parents divorced. We were able to form a strong bond while still maintaining a close relationship, a ship, with his father. Despite our different sports preferences. He supported the Chicago Cubs, and I supported the New York Yankees. We were able to find a common language by supporting each other's teams when they were not in competition because they were in different leagues. When Lainey and I bought our house, it had 4 bedrooms, and the second floor of the house was divided into 2 main bedrooms. There was a master bedroom at one end and a smaller bedroom at the other end. The master bedroom had a private bathroom, and the smaller bedroom had a bathroom with a shower. Although the smaller bedroom could be used as a guest room, it was always assumed that it belonged to Sean. The uncertainty of giving him this room disappeared when he said that the separation would help reduce the noise in our room. Come on, Mom, I'm 14 years old. Do you really think I do not know what you are going to do in your room? He said, trying to defuse the situation. It's all your fault. Lainey countered playfully. He talks to you too much. Rose took an instant liking to Lainey when they first met. Even before I proposed. I thought Rose was jealous of how close Sean and I were. I'm so happy to finally have the son I've always dreamed of. I told her, and there was a hint of tension in her voice. Rose, having a son is great, but you will always be my little girl. Your place in my heart is irreplaceable. I assured her that Sean had just found his own place in our lives. We hugged tightly. I'm glad you found someone, Daddy. I was afraid you'd be alone forever. She whispered, though Rose never asked. She kept me informed of her mother's affairs. My ex-wife was dating young men, some as young as her own daughter could date. Rose jokingly expressed fears that she would have to introduce Marcy to her companions for fear that her mother would try to seduce her. 2 years after marrying Laney, Rose married a tall man who had previously played in the minor leagues after retiring from baseball. He found a use for his business education by getting a job in the financial sector. Despite his dedication to the Atlanta Braves, he became close to Sean and me because of our shared passion for baseball. When the three of us were together, the tension sometimes reached its peak, so Laney and Rose preferred to go shopping. As we watched the games, Rose warned me that Marcy was bringing her fiancé, Larry, a banker in his 40s, to the wedding. He's just an adorable dad, but I think she's really into him, so just try to stay calm, even if he pulls you, she said, as long as he doesn't overdo it. I replied that Rose understood Larry. He was calm, but he knew when to back off. I could tell that Marcy was worried about him pushing my buttons because she never went too far when we talked. As the father of the bride, I financed the wedding and made sure Rose had everything she wanted. During my successful career at Isaacs Forsman Associates, I became a 10% partner. Philip Isaac and Jack Forsman even suggested that I add my name to the company name, but I felt that Isaacs Forsman had a strong corporate identity that I didn't want to change much. I didn't need approval to boost my self-esteem since I was the only one paying. I decided to treat myself to something special later in the evening. I pulled out a bottle of 12-year-old Pappy Van Winkle Special Reserve Bourbon for my guests, who now included Phil and Bob Isaacs, Jack Forsman, my new son-in-law, and Larry McIntyre. I raised my glass to make a toast as we enjoyed our drinks. Larry whispered something to my ex-wife for the first time that night. He looked genuinely impressed. Later, Marcy pulled me aside to thank me for organizing a wonderful event and for including Larry in the celebration. You must be well. Norm must have been expensive tonight. She said I've been fine for a long time, even when we were married. You just didn't realize it because you were so focused on your soulmate. And to be honest, I'm not sorry it didn't work out for you. Maybe Larry is a better fit for you. Marcy successfully walked down the aisle with Larry, but their marriage ended in divorce less than 3 years later. Marcy, on the other hand, seemed to be mostly alone, occasionally visiting an elderly fan and regularly spending bingo nights at her church. Over time, our bond with Laney grew stronger, and Rose and my brother-in-law gave us 2 grandchildren. Meanwhile, Sean got a job at Isaacs Forsman Associates after graduating from college and married his wife 2 years later, giving our family 3 new grandchildren. Laney and I have often discussed the idea of becoming empty nesters, and after careful consideration, we decided to buy an SUV and travel the country while keeping the house to spend time with our grandchildren. It's been quite a while since I last saw Tim Wycliffe, and I can't help but wonder how things turned out for him, while I enjoyed a large and wonderful family. Marcy was lonely and unhappy. She had no long-term relationships with men. What happened in her many relationships? I do not know. Perhaps it was her infidelity, but one day at a family gathering, she confessed to me that she was very sorry that she had exchanged me for another man during the evening. It was that evening that our entire family stopped communicating with her when Marcy brazenly started kissing Rose's husband, who was shocked at the sight of his mother-in-law. There was a huge scandal when Rose caught Marcy cuddling up to her son-in-law. It's been 5 years since then, and now Marcy is being treated in a psychiatric hospital. Apparently she had health problems a long time ago, but we didn't pay attention to it, and that ends this story. Visit my channel more often, and I'll keep you entertained with new stories. May the force be with you. Bye.